saw bodies laid about the ground outside of the building. Some had seemed to come from the fourth floor where the plasma damage hole was, due to the blood pattern on the ground. As I looked closer, I saw more bodies spilling out of that damaged section. I looked around as I approached the building, and across the way in the street was a downed phantom engulfed in smoke and flames. I entered the Oni building, and as expected, everything was a mess on the first floor. I cleared the first floor for hostiles and found the elevator, but it wasn't working. It sounded jammed. I pry open the elevator doors, and all I see are alien bodies. Some full size and some in pieces, splattered on the ground. I look up, turning on my flashlights, and see the elevator is stuck towards the third floor with alien blood running down the sides of the elevator shaft. Since the elevator wasn't going to work, I found the stairwell and made my way to the next floor. Second floor was easily cleared with nothing of note other than some jackal bodies and damaged cubicles. As I climbed the stairs to the third floor, more mangled, burned, and bloody alien bodies started to appear on the stairwell. They all seemed to be falling down the stairwell from that fourth floor. I had to carefully step over and on some bodies to even make it up the stairs. By the time I reached the fourth floor stairwell doorway, the bodies were beginning to stack up to the top of my shins. I peeked up the stairwell, and there weren't any bodies coming from the fifth floor, so all the evidence led to this area. I walked through the entrance, as there's no stairwell door, it was just the hinges. The fourth floor had a little lobby area with the elevator door parallel to the stairwell door. You were then greeted by a long hallway with multiple doors on each side. According to the Oni schematics I was sent, at the end of the hallway, there was a safe room disguised to look like a normal back wall. I couldn't walk anywhere without stepping on bodies at that point, so I sat up against one of the lobby walls connected to the hallway best I could. As I peeked around the corner, a bullet from what sounded like an M6G Magnum hit my shielding, and I quickly pulled back behind the wall. I looked around for a moment and saw there was a little mug on the ground somewhat obscured by the bodies behind me, so I grabbed it. I threw the mug out towards the hallway, and instantly it was blown to bits by what was sure enough a Magnum round. I announced,
"This is call sign Sierra 113. Please put down your weapon. I've been sent to help."
I then hear an arm and the Magnum hit the ground, or what suffices as the ground. I peek around the corner, assault rifle drawn, and all I see is the hallway filled with bodies and weapons, along with plenty of battle damage lining every inch of the hallway. At the very end of the hallway, sitting up against the safe room wall, is William. He's taken a spike around to his left shoulder, which is pinning him to the safe room wall. Smaller plasma burns have pierced his armor, but not his flesh. He is bleeding from multiple places through his armor, and looks like he should already be dead. He has all kinds of guns, human and Covenant, laying around him. Empty magazines and bullet shells fill the floor at his feet. He could barely move, and I have no idea how he held on for that long. First thing I did was pull him and the spike from the wall, trying to make sure the spike didn't get removed, causing him to completely bleed out. I lifted him from the safe room wall and moved him aside. I used my trauma kit to patch up the smaller cuts, burns, and bleeding that I could. I also gave him some adrenaline to wake him up as much as possible. He was going to at least need to be able to hobble if I was going to get him out of there. He took a big, deep breath and started to endure through the pain. Then I asked him what happened here. He said the last thing he remembered was staring down that hallway after he got the survivors in the safe room. He didn't know why there were so many bodies or what had happened during the battle. He completely blacked out. But whatever he did worked. I asked him about the survivors, and he said that if he was up against that wall, then they were safe. I bang on the wall and again announce myself. The wall slides open, and a woman with an Oni outfit on is standing at the doorway. She asks what happened, and I just say,
He happened.
while looking at William. I ask if everyone is okay, and she confirms that they are. I tell her that it's time to get out of here and to collect everyone for extraction. I ask William if he can stand, and he tries to lift himself up, but he couldn't even make it a foot off the ground. So I grab him, helped him up, and placed him against the wall, leaning against the wall. I pick up the magnum he dropped the magazine that was in it, and attach it to William's armor thigh magnet. I then put in a fresh magazine and hand him the magnum. He takes it, stands as tall as he can, and starts moving down the hall, holding onto the wall and trying to push bodies aside to clear a path. I take count and status of all 8 people and inform them that we will have to hoof it a few blocks to the LZ. I inform the Pelican pilot that we are on our way with injured and to fire up the engines. William held up for a while, walking on his own, but with 1 block left, he fell to his knees as his body was just too fatigued and damaged to keep going. I pick him up and get him to hobble the next block while keeping an eye on the survivors. The Pelican is revealed as we walk past this big 10-story building, and it is stationed in a courtyard. As it came into view, the pilot came out of the back of the Pelican and started firing shots at something with an assault rifle. I got William about 20 feet from the Pelican and up against a planter while I told the survivors to stay close to him and behind cover. I pushed towards the pilot who was fighting some elites. I immediately start firing AR shots into one of the elites. I rip through its shielding, and it suddenly falls to the ground, face forward, and then is shot in the head. I look back for a moment, and William is taking shots from the cover he's in. He is one stubborn motherfucker, that's for sure. I tell him to save his ammo for now, and quickly I take out the other elites with my shotgun. Just as I finished off the last elite, a wraith and 2 ghosts came around a building from one of the main streets about 2 blocks down. The Pelican was facing the opposite way, so I wasn't about to get direct gun support. I told William and the pilot to get everyone on board and just take off. Just as I ended my sentence, I activated my cloaking. This was back when I had a time and movement-based cloaking, and moved towards the ghosts. The street had a choke point that was created by cars and road barriers. I used some of the cars and road barriers as cover to give me an extra stealth advantage. One ghost pushed up further than the other, and I took my opportunity. As I made a beeline for the Pelican coming right through the choke point, I caught the elite driver off guard by pulling it out of the driver's seat, using the ghost to skid across the ground. I threw the elite to the ground and shot him point blank with my shotgun, sending blood, brains, and pieces of armor along the street. This decloaked me, and the second ghost had made it through right behind the first. The ghost immediately spun around and started firing at me. As the ghost fired at me, I used the cars and barriers as cover to start running towards the wraith. With the ghost pursuing me and the wraith approaching me in the front, I rolled off to the right just as the wraith took a shot towards me. The wraith shot hit right in front of the ghost, sending the driver flying and slamming into the wraith, killing the ghost driver on impact. While this is going down, William had been trying to deal with getting all the civilians and personnel into the Pelican. Turns out some Jackal snipers decided to post up in multiple nearby buildings, and William was escorting everyone while using his body as a shield. Even though he only had a Magnum, he was still taking carefully placed shots at the Jackals. He managed to escort everyone inside the Pelican, and then told the pilot to take off. He then told the pilot to spin around so he could shoot the rest of the Jackals, and so that the pilot could simultaneously start shooting at the wraith. William remembers taking out at least 3 more Jackals before he blacked out again. Right after the wraith shot the ghost, I used the plasma explosion and smoke to move in on the wraith. I climbed the front of the wraith, taking out its gunner with my shotgun, and then moved to the back for easy access to its vital parts. I started ripping into the back of it with my left hand, while I held onto it with my right. It spun around back in the direction it had come from, trying to fling me off, but I held on tight. Just then, the Pelican started to fire on the top of the wraith. The Pelican's machine gun completely broke open the back end of the wraith, which started to catch fire. I jumped off of the wraith and let the Pelican keep shredding it apart. The wraith spun back around towards the Pelican and took a shot. The Pelican moved to avoid it, but ran into the side of one of the buildings, damaging the left wing a bit. This wasn't enough to take down the Pelican, just cause a good dent. While the wraith was distracted, I was able to cloak myself again and leave a little present in the now heavily damaged exhaust port. The wraith went to fire again, but my present took effect, and the wraith blew up in a blaze of glory. Metal pieces and small bits of fire flying in all directions, the wraith itself falling to pieces as if someone pulled it apart by its seams. The elite inside was burning alive and managed to climb out of the driver's seat, but fell limp from the overload of pain, and its body slid down the front of the wraith, burning to a crisp on the ground. I uncloaked myself and made my way under the Pelican as it came down to pick me up. First thing I saw was William sitting in a seat passed out from exhaustion, being strapped in by one of the only personnel, while the others were all strapped in and scared to be shot at. I told the pilot to get us to the nearest medical station ASAP. I then walked over to William, grabbing him by his helmet and lightly shaking his head. I told him to stay with me and try to stay awake best he could. William remembers going in and out, trying his best not to fall asleep, seeing flashes of me and the other passengers along with the inside of the Pelican. The facility sat not too far outside of Qzon and was hidden within the side of a small mountain. It used to be for weapons storage and testing, but with the Covenant threat, all the weapons were taken, and the UNSC converted the facility. The facility had a huge storage hangar with offices further into the facility. We landed right outside the storage hangar, and as the hangar door opened, we walked in and saw all different kinds of people laying in beds or on the floor of the hangar. Marines, civilians, government officials, all either injured or next to someone injured. Even though William and I were somewhat kicking ass, it still let us know just how bad we were losing. I don't know if we gave them hope or more fear as they saw how badly William was injured. And it seemed to be a mix of excitement and disappointment among the murmuring in the building. I quickly got William to a back room, and the staff immediately pulled a doctor and multiple nurses over to address his wounds. They asked for the room to be cleared for space, so I walked out. From what William can remember, the doctor made quick work of the plasma burns, giving him what they could with what little supplies they had left. The biggest thing was the spike sticking out of his shoulder. He felt when they ripped it from his shoulder, and he grunted in pain, slamming his right fist into the operating table, denting it. The doctors and nurses quickly filled the wound with foam and bandaged his shoulder. The small cuts and holes were also bandaged and filled with the rest of the foam they had in the canister. They straight up welded pieces of titanium metal they had from bits of broken objects and patched all the holes in his armor best they could. It wasn't the best work by any means, and he looked like an idiot when he came out of the room, but it was all we were going to get at the time. The armor was fucked anyway, and he would need a new set. Strangely, the 4 Oni personnel he saved sat outside of the room with me and waited for his status. As for the 4 civilians, they were escorted to beds or other rooms when we arrived. One of the Oni personnel, male, was a little hysterical, but basically said thank you and said they'd be dead if it wasn't for William and subsequently me if we hadn't been there. That gave me some hope, for a moment at least. I decided to call in a favor and sent out a message to see if I could get any Pelicans to help escort the civilians off planet. As about an hour passed, William walked out of his operating room, looking almost brand new actually, a whole different person from when I found him. We quickly established that he was of higher rank than me, though don't tell him, but I think we're the same rank if we're accounting for experience. Just saying. He would be on lead for the rest of the mission. He asked me what the status of Reach was, and I just gestured my arm with an open palm across the hallway, rooms, and hangar filled with broken, bloodied, and crying people in the building. Being the absolute machine he was back then, he wasn't too fond of my answer. Thought I was a bit too sarcastic for a Spartan. I simply told him that we're losing, and it's not looking like we're going to be able to save Reach at the rate the Covenant is attacking. He asked where I'd come from. I told him what I was doing on Reach, taking out operating bases, and was redirected to his position. He rephrased his question and instead asked where I had come from off-planet. How did I get on Reach? And I told him that I have a ship, but it's the classified kind. That's when he told me he works for Oni 2, but hasn't been informed of this special ship. I informed him that we could get to this ship and take the Oni personnel with us, but no one else. He replied with, "Complete the objective. That's what I'm here to do." Such a Boy Scout. I didn't like the thought of just leaving these people to fend for themselves, but what was I to do? Even with William's help, how could we get them all off planet? Where would they be safe? I begrudgingly agreed and said, "Let's complete the mission." As we went back to the Pelican, I heard people saying things like, "What about us? Why are you leaving? Aren't you here to help us?" William went straight to the cockpit to talk to the pilot, and as I was loading the personnel, all I could start to feel was guilt. How did this make us look? Like machines? Like we only cared for this special group of people? Just then, a call was heard over the comms that a lone Pelican was inbound for civilian transport. A sigh of relief came over me, but William was confused and asked me where this pelican had come from. I told him that I called it in, and he said I was way out of line, that it was his call to make, and that they might not even be able to get all the civilians out of the facility. I told him that we could at least try, that those people were just as fucked as we might be. He said that he was there for the only personnel that was his mission. He was all machine at that point, so cold-hearted and brainwashed by Oni. I snapped back by telling him he became my mission when I found him. Should I have just left him there to die in that building? Nowadays, since William has had time to reflect on his past and break the brainwashing, he does feel guilty for leaving that facility the way he did. He knows what he did wasn't what he should have done, and he could have gotten all those people killed if he was calling the shots that day. We actually made it off-world and onto the Asunder far safer than we thought we would, though not without some detours along the way. One of these detours included me being used as a distraction and damaging my beautiful new armor. Long story short, we had been seen by a Type 52 Troop Phantom and had to stash the Pelican and personnel away for a little bit while William and I took care of the Phantom and its crew. We hid in a small city and used the terrain to our advantage. William and I were able to lure the Phantom away from where we stashed the Pelican and into an area with densely populated buildings. I kept distracting the Phantom by moving cover to cover while William was sneaking around in a building to get the jump on the Phantom. Right when I popped out in the middle of the street, the Phantom turned to fire at me. Just as it started to fire at me is when William was winding up to jump out of a window and into the Phantom. Since he was a little slow, the Phantom was able to effectively take out my shields and cause my arm to take heavy plasma damage before I could get into cover. When William jumped through the window from the 5th floor of this building, the grunt on the turret nearly shit himself before William took it and threw it at an elite standing next to the turret gunner on the parallel side of the Phantom. The elite fell out of the Phantom and hit the ground, instantly splattering on the street. William then grabbed the second turret gunner from its post and threw it out of the Phantom as well, killing it. William ripped off one of the turrets and used it to mow down the drivers of the Phantom. William crashed the Phantom into a building by destroying its control panel. Side note, to this day, William and I still question why we were spared. Why we were even able to get off of reach the way we did. We finally decided a few years ago that we were spared because of the brave men, women, brothers, and sisters who fought tooth and nail for not only their own lives, but the lives of every human out there. We weren't lucky. We didn't have some advantage. They gave us an opportunity to continue the fight in their place. For that, we choose to live for them and for all they did. Due to the events of Noble Team and the rest of the UNSC, we were just barely able to slip by the Covenant's defenses to get off of reach. And all the way to the Asunder, mostly unscathed. Once we made it to the Asunder, which was trying its hardest to avoid all Covenant activities, we were able to leave Reach undetected due to the Covenant fleet focusing on the siege of major cities and the glassing of the planet. Once within a safe distance for a slip-space jump without detection, we were ordered to make a trip to Earth. It would take us about 2 weeks to get to Earth. It was a straight shot, but the captain of the Asunder played it safe by taking an alternate route. This was to avoid any Covenant ships pursuing us that may not have been detected. Though this trip would take about 2.5 weeks now, William and I wouldn't see each other too much. William was mostly recovering from his wounds, which ended up taking far more of a toll on him than he initially expected. I was just trying to pass the time with whatever I could do around the ship. Our armors couldn't undergo proper repairs as the Sunder wasn't equipped with that tech. We docked at Oni's Belgrano station above Antarctica and finally got a little bit of downtime while our armors went repairs and replacement. I, of course, got the same armor I already had, but William got to pick out a fancy new set of armor thanks to Oni and his other armor being destroyed. For his helmet, he decided on the Mark VI they were working on. That was almost fully complete and ready to be issued. He would later receive the hardened uplink attachment as well. For his chest piece, since he constantly used up so much ammo, he chose to have a tactical chest piece, specifically the Recon type, that came with many pockets and pouches. For the shoulders, William went simple. He just took the basic Mark V variants, though he would frequently swap between a combo of commando and security pieces depending on the situation. The knee guards he decided on, he must have liked the ones I had, because he ended up getting the same ones, the FJ type para variant. For his wrist, since he's such a Boy Scout, he got the tac pad so he could get a bead on combat information much easier. I personally thought he had enough pouches on his chest, but apparently he wanted more because he decided to get the tactical soft case on his left thigh. Since my buddies on the Asunder decked out my armor with a special paint job, I offered William one too. He seemed to think about it for a bit and shockingly agreed to it. I thought he was all by the books and would want one of the boring colors they usually issue with the armor, but that's when I started to see a little bit of a personality in him. He requested a cobalt blue for his primary color and wanted more of a seafoam blue for secondary. No accent color, and his visor stayed the basic gold that the helmets are typically issued with. Still in the station by this point, that fancy new armor would inspire William to get back into the fight better than ever. We were actually getting to know each other a bit better in the mess hall, in our own corner, unbothered. I was trying to get William to come out of his shell more when an Oni officer told us to report to the higher-ups immediately. We both looked at each other, shrugged, and stood up, following the officer to a meeting room. That's when we got the news. William and I were to work together from now on. William gave a look of disapproval at first, but wasn't one to refuse orders. I was surprised, as they seemed to specifically keep me away from other Spartans up until that point. It made me far more paranoid and suspicious of their plans. But, nonetheless, William and I would get to know each other very well over the next several years.